CBS This Morning will be broadcasting live from the Smithsonian's new National Museum of African American History and Culture this coming Monday. It's going to be the first broadcast by a media outlet to do a live show from that museum before it opens to the public on September 24th. The show is going to give all of us an exclusive look at the nation's first national museum honoring African American life, history, and culture, and not a moment too soon. And look who's joining me to discuss it.
A media outlet.
We wrangled.
Yes, I know,
we wrangled all three of them.
We're a media outlet.
You're a triumvirate, really.
What you were trying to say was the best morning show on television.
That's
exactly what you were trying to say.
And one that you're thrilled to be a part of, by the way.
I thought that was just assumed. I've seen the graphs, after all. Ryan and the graphs. It was quite a picture.
This is a great occasion for us. And the whole team who set it up, you know, they really understood that this has great great sense of history and a great sense of the contribution of African Americans, as well as a sense of the struggle from slavery to freedom.
And certainly,
all of that's there, and we're honored to be there.
And I know you had Senator Kaine on your program this morning, and he talked about this moment in time, that it is that as the conversation that a lot of people have discussed, the national conversation we have to have, this is a moment to put that conversation in a specific place.
Listen, you think about the history of slavery over 400 years, but Tim Kaine pointed out it's only the last half century that Black Americans were entitled to equality. So think about that, Josh, when you think about the numbers. And here we sit in 2016, we're the first Black president. You know, we've heard about some of the exhibits in the museum, so it goes from slavery right up to the inauguration of Barack Obama. That's amazing.
It's a remarkable thing.
That's amazing. And that we get to be the first ones to bring it to you.
So what are you looking forward to? Nora, what are you looking forward to?
Well, I'm looking to seeing everything that's inside the museum. I mean, it's huge. It's 10 stories. I think it's over 400,000 square feet. Emmett Till's coffin. Nat Turner's Bible.
Harriet Tubman's prayer shawl.
Harriet Tubman's prayer shawl. So those are some of the I think the more well-known artifacts that they've gathered. But one of the most striking things to me was that when Lonnie Bunch, the director, started this, they didn't have a single artifact. And they decided to do like an Antiques Roadshow, you know, one of the most popular shows on PBS, and go out and say, everyone bring us some artifacts that you have. And they've compiled tens and tens of thousands of artifacts that now fill this museum. So this really is the people's museum. And I think it's important not only to see the struggle of our country and what this represents, but also the struggle to get this museum built. I mean, first conceived in 1950, but it wasn't until Congressman John Lewis in the 1980s brought it back to Congress, said, let's put this on the National Mall. It deserves to be there. And for 15 years, Congress opposed it, voted against it. Think about that. And when it was finally approved, Congress only paid for half of it, even though most of the other museums and monuments were paid for in full. And so now we have this beautiful crown-like museum that sits right smack dab in the middle of the Washington Mall, right next to the Washington Monument.
And considering the subject, Charlie, it's finally a chance, I think, for everyone to be on the right side of a very complicated history.
It is time this country has a full conversation about slavery. We talked to Senator Kaine, now the vice presidential nominee for the Democratic Party, and he said, you know, he has apologized for slavery when he was mayor of Richmond and when he was governor of Virginia. And it suggested he thought the president might do the same thing. It would be time for that. And for us fully to understand the connection between slavery and racism that still exists in certain areas today.
How do you think an apology from the president, and specifically President Obama, for slavery would land on the people of this country?
Well, I think the president, in his own eloquence, would be able to use language to say exactly what he means. And he clearly has said that we've made significant progress. As a black man, he understands that. He also knows we have a distance to go. But there is a connection between slavery and where we are. And it has time for us to have a conversation about it and to apologize for it.
And certainly conversations about racism and slavery always, Josh, I think make people uncomfortable. But until you go back and really acknowledge, sometimes people just want to acknowledge, look, this really happened. And this is how bad it was. We know it happened, but to really focus on how bad it was you know, you had families that were split apart, men that were emasculated, men that had to see their wives and children being raped, and
People
nothing
were
you could do about it.
property.
And people were, that's right, they were property, they weren't even human beings. So when you walk in and you see we the people, that didn't even apply to black people in the beginning until the 13th
And
Amendment.
apologists have made a difference in places
Yes.
like the Truth and Reconciliation in South Africa. Made a huge difference.
But also, I mean, I brought up Emmett Till's coffin. What that coffin represents. I mean, we know the story of Emmett Till, but the story is really about his mother. You know, Mamie Mabley, who his face was so badly beaten. She wanted to leave the coffin open so that people would remember. So when people would know what was done to him. Think about the power of that action that she took and what it set off. You know,
that a 14-year-old kid who
may not know about.
That a 14-year-old, Emmett Till was 14 at the time, that he whistled or made eye contact with a white woman and lost his life because of that. You know, that is astounding to those of us who live today. But back then, that was very common. And I agree. I think what his mother did was very courageous, because it was, when you look at it, it doesn't even look humane. It doesn't look human, his face.
Also touch on the point that what Norah suggested. The Congress only appropriated half of the cost of this. The other half was raised privately. And a lot of people stepped forward to give as little as $25. And people like Oprah Winfrey made significant contributions. So did
Michael Jordan
and
Denzel.
Yeah, there
lot
are
of people, a lot of
100,000
African-Americans.
contributions of just about $25.
It's crowdsourced, as you mentioned, both inside and out. Not that it's an uncomfortable question, Gayle, but to even suspend your journalistic objectivity for a moment. What will this be like for you personally?
Well, I mean, it definitely, I can't deny, as I sit here as a person of color, cinnamon brown with a dollop of caramel, you know, I can't help but feel the pride of what that museum represents. I saw the museum when it was just a drawing on a piece of paper in Lonnie Bunch's office. Then I saw the replica on his desk, and the excitement that he had when he was talking about putting it together and the struggle that he had getting it done. So to see it really come together, you know, I remember when he had the prayer shawl and we had to touch it with gloves to take a look at it. So I feel an enormous sense of pride of the history of what it represents and the conversation that it's going to start. I think that is so important.
it's very important that they say they want this to be a venue for conversation about racism, as well as plans to do something with it. Go beyond conversation to have, you know, an action agenda.
And Lonnie's really trying to make it a living museum, right?
Yes.
Yeah, where it's a
Right.
contemporary museum, so it's not static. In other words, that it will continue to
Right.
grow and evolve.
Yeah, looking back and moving forward. And as a person of color, of course, I feel a personal connection. But this is not just a museum for black people. I love that it really is American history.
Yeah.
And so it's something that we can all enjoy, we can all rejoice and embrace and celebrate.
And we know from this conversation that so many of us, I think, believe is important to have. The struggle does continue, and so
May I add one quick thing before you go? Is that, you know, what we're going to have on Monday, interviews with Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General of the United States, John Lewis, the great civil rights hero, Senators Tim Scott and Cory Booker. The first time that there have been two elected African Americans sitting in the United States Senate. Elected African American senators.
And one Democrat and one Republican.
And we also,
Love that.
and it's with limited commercial interruption. We should point out that it's
We're not prepared for that yet because
Right.
we would like to build in the bathroom breaks.
a lot of time.
So-
a lot of time.
So we will try and do our very best.
We're going big. We're pulling out all the stops. You know what it's like to take this broadcast on the
I do.
road.
Of course, you won't be going big, you know, for a couple hours apparently. So that's important. Listen, you know, here we are, and as we get ready to recognize the 15th anniversary of the attacks of September 11th, 2001, and we invoke the idea of never forget. I think it's going to carry over certainly to September 12th. Really looking forward to it.
Thank you.
I know we'll be having updates here on CBSN as well, but cannot wait for the broadcast.
Thank you.
Everybody, tune in.
Yes.
It is going to be
Yes.
it's
Thank
going
you,
to be a
Josh.
piece of history itself. Thank you guys.
Good to
Thank
see you.
Have a great weekend.